Hello everyone, this is the start of a new reading vlog. I'm just going to be vlogging my life over the course of the next 3 books that I read, and who knows what those will be. I'm a mood reader, so I'm not setting a strict TBR for this vlog. We're just gonna see how things happen. It's actually February 1st right now. I am only reading one book and I'm at the very beginning, and that is Redemptor by Jordan Ifweko. This is the second book in the Ray Bear duology. I read this at the end of January, so finishing up the duology. This is going to be spoiler free, so I will not tell you any of the plot details about the sequel. I am currently on page 40. This one is actually surprisingly short. I'm looking at the page count and it's like only a little bit over 300 pages. So I'm curious to see how she wraps up this story in just 300 pages, because Ray Bear I think was about 400. Maybe a little less. I do have 2 other books out from the library that I would like to try to prioritize. I have A Dark and Drowning Tide by Alison Saft, which is like a sapphic fantasy, like a chill fantasy book with some romance. And then I have a love song for Ricky Wilde, which is on my 25 for 25 TBR, and it is a Black romance book, and it is Black History Month and Valentine's Day month, so I think this would be a really good way to start off both of those themes this month. And then these are all TBR books except for some of the first Anne of Green Gables books, and then these are all the rest of my TBR books. Luckily all of the books on my Black Billy shelf are read books, so oh, that just zoomed in automatically. Why did it do that? Anyway, yeah, so I like having all of my books in 2 spots. I would love to someday have just TBR books on this shelf, nowhere else in my home. We'll see how that goes. Hi friends, it is Sunday. I'm about to cook some dinner for my husband and I, but right now I wanted to give you a reading update. I am about 114 pages into Redemptor. I've been reading this mostly on audio because Sundays are the days where we do most of our weekly cleaning, so I've just needed something to listen to while I do some mindless tasks. And overall, I would say that this one is not as gripping as the first book in the series for me. I also listened to a lot of that one on audio, so I know it's not the format. There's just a lot going on in this book, and we have plot stuff from the other book that's continuing into the sequel, but we also have some new plot elements that are introduced having to do with the Empire, and some problems that need to be resolved, need to be fixed somehow. And there's just so much that's been introduced, and this is only a 320 page book. So I'm very curious to see how the author manages to wrap all of these things up. It just seems like the problems that our main characters need to solve are just so ginormous and huge and important and difficult that I just don't know how all of that is going to happen in the next 130 pages. Actually, it's more like 215 pages. I'm great at math. So I wouldn't go so far as to say that I'm disappointed with this book, but I just don't think that it's quite as compulsively readable as the first book, and I don't think that it is quite as exciting, even though there's a lot going on. It's just not quite as brilliantly put together as the first one, in my opinion. So I'm gonna cook us some dinner. It's basically a lemon butter angel hair pasta with shrimp and then some asparagus on the side. We are gonna finish watching Rebecca, the Hitchcock adaptation from 1940, which is pretty excellent. We watched most of it last night, but we have the last 40 minutes left. So yeah, hopefully it'll be a nice, relaxing evening. So I'm happy to say that I have finished Redemptor. It's the afternoon of the 4th, and I started reading this on like the last day of January. I was getting to the point where I just really wanted to finish this book and find out everything that happened. So I've been reading for most of the day. Well, I've done other things too, but I finally finished, and I'm giving Redemptor 4 stars. I know earlier in the book I was worried at how the author was going to wrap up all these plot lines, and ultimately I think she did a pretty good job. I think that in YA fantasy, things are often a little bit less high stakes than in adult fantasy. There is perhaps less devastation and less kind of anxiety and violence, and basically it's not as intense as an adult fantasy book. So I think the choices that she made make a lot of sense once you get to the end of the book, and I doubted her a little, but I shouldn't have. I thought this was really good. I didn't love it as much as the first book. Definitely had like this insane chemistry with the book from the very start, and this one I felt like was just not quite as perfect. But that's okay. I'm really glad that I read this duology one after the other, so I didn't forget all of the names of the different like countries and all of the characters. It was just a great reading experience. Reading these two back to back, highly recommend. Also, when you read the author's note, it talks about the fact that the author was writing this during the pandemic, specifically like in the summer of 2020, and it was a really intense time for her, and she had a really difficult time writing this. So I think that putting that in context especially just shows how incredibly talented she is, and some of the messaging in this book is really powerful and interesting. Yeah, I'm excited to read her newest book, which is like The Crocodile and the Maid or something, and there is a character in this book called the Crocodile, so I'm wondering if that is like the main character of that book. It's not necessarily like the third book in the series. I think it's just another book in this world. So that is the first book in the vlog done, and now we have to pick our next book. Yesterday, as you will have seen in the b-roll, I found The Spell Shop at my local library, which is super exciting. I've had the audiobook on hold on Libby off and on for a while, and the wait was always just so long, and my library actually decreased the number of holds that you can have on Libby from 10 to 6, and so I always like second guess myself on which books are really worth having on hold. So I'm trying to decide if I'm more in the mood to read The Spell Shop or A Love Song for Ricky Wilde next. But since I've been reading most of the day, I think I'm gonna go edit a little bit of this video and then work on some of my romance novel. If you don't know, I am writing a romance novel, and it doesn't really feel real. Writing still feels like something that's very like silly and idealistic and naive to do, just because in my head, like, becoming a published author is such a difficult and rare thing that like only happens if, you know, you get lucky or you have like incredible skill in marketing your book and marketing yourself. And so it just doesn't feel like it's ever going to really happen for me, but I'm trying to push those feelings aside and just keep writing. I'm still in the first draft of my novel, and I think it's going to change a lot in the second draft. So if you watching this are an aspiring writer, if you write, if you've published something, let me know if you ever want to chat. I would love to. Yeah, it's a very isolating experience to just be alone and working on something that you do not know is ever going to see the light of day. I don't ever know if anyone's actually going to read this, if I'm ever actually going to make any money from it. And so it feels almost like stupid to just sit down and take so much time doing this instead of doing something else that would make me money, even if I hate it. I just need to keep going. I need to keep going. I've always wanted to be a writer. That's always secretly what I really wanted. Like whenever someone asked me what I wanted to be, you know, in college, I thought I was either going to be a lawyer or go into academia. But in the back of my mind, I always knew that I wanted to be a writer. So I just need to keep going and not give up. And I will get back to you hopefully later this evening and tell you which one of these I have chosen. Maybe I will read the first few pages and see which one is calling to me. I need to be in my defying gravity era, okay? I need to be having delusions of grandeur in order to get this fucking book written. I'm about to start dinner, but I do have two quick updates. One is that I actually ended up choosing a love song for Ricky Wilde. I think I'm a little bit fantasied out, and I know I'm going to be reading at least 2 long fantasy books this month, so I thought I'd go with this one. Take a little break. I got 16 pages in, and I probably would have read more if I hadn't had a headache when I started it. And yeah, I don't know the full synopsis yet, so I won't try to give it to you, but I know that this does have magical realism in it, so I'm excited for that. And then something very exciting came in the mail, and that is the Blu-ray of Wicked. I know a lot of people bought this on Amazon Prime, like video, but my husband is a big Blu-ray guy. So he was like, let's just get the Blu-ray, which I do appreciate because I think it's easier to access the bonus content with the Blu-ray. Anyway, you don't care, but I am excited to have Wicked and be able to watch it whenever I want for free. I mean, it's not for free because I paid for it, but it feels free. So I am 104 pages into a love song for Ricky Wilde. Plot twist. Ricky Wilde is the girl. I always thought that the love song was going to be for the boy, but the love song is for the girl. Her name is Ricky. And Ricky comes from a very affluent black family who has this chain of like funeral homes in Atlanta, and her parents are like millionaires because of this business. Her 3 other sisters are all like exactly what her parents wanted them to turn out to be, which is that they, you know, they went to Ivy League schools and they got business degrees, and now they all run like a franchise of this funeral home business. So Ricky is very much like the black sheep of the family. She does not fit in. It's alluded that she has ADHD. I mean, it's clear that she has ADHD, and the way that it's said is in like a humorous way. And she just does not really give a shit about this business, and she doesn't have the same like goals and the same drive to just like make a shit ton of money and be like a successful businesswoman or socialite like her sisters. And at the beginning of the book, we learn that she has this plan to start a flower shop, and when she tells her family in the very first scene, they really don't believe that she can do it. So Ricky is feeling pretty down on her luck and pretty sad that nobody believes in her. And she, while working at her job at the like funeral home where she works as like a receptionist, she meets this woman, this mysterious older black woman named Miss Della, and they kind of like immediately connect. And Ricky starts telling her her story and like what she wants to do with her life. And Miss Della is like, well, you know, since you're not really liking any of the properties that you can afford in Atlanta, I actually have this brownstone in Harlem in New York City, and I only use the top 3 floors, but I don't use the bottom floor, which you could use as a storefront. And she like shows her a picture, and it just kind of like feels like fate. So for most of this book, we have been following Ricky as she gets started opening up this flower shop business in New York City. But we're also getting the perspective of this man named Breeze, who is from the 1920s. And it's still unclear to me, 100 pages in, exactly how these 2 characters are going to meet and come together, and like, is one of them going to try time travel to the other one's time period, or are they both going to time travel? Like what facilitates the time travel? You know from like the very first page that it has something to do with leap years. So far there has been no real romance. We've like basically just gotten a few interactions between these characters. I don't know. It's still not clear like how everything is going to work out. And there are certain like little Easter eggs throughout both of their chapters where you see how their lives have kind of converged, or like Ricky will go to a spot in like 2024 New York where we saw Breeze go in his chapter, and she's looking at it as like a historical place because of XYZ famous musician or something who went there. And we see Breeze like actually there in the 1920s. So this very much is just reading like a historical fiction, magical realism type of story so far. I am enjoying it though. I think it's a very fast read. I like the writing. It isn't perfect. There's a little bit of like, I don't want to say TikTok language, but I don't hate it. I'm definitely enjoying this. I'm really excited to see how this romance progresses because it's not going to be that complicated. But it seems like right now Breeze knows who Ricky is, but Ricky has no idea what's going on. She kind of views him as this like mysterious man who's kind of entered her life, and she feels something, but she doesn't know what it means. I really hope it picks up soon. If the book makes us wait like too long for it to get romantic, I think that will be a problem, because at the end of the day, this is marketed as a romance novel, not a historical fiction. So I hope we get some romance, some tension, something more really soon. But I think if that happens, I don't see this getting lower than like a 3.5. So I have some less than great news about how this book ended up being for me. I just finished it like 5 minutes ago. And when I last updated you, I was saying that I was excited for the romance to actually start, because we'd had like a little bit of interaction between the characters, but like not very much. And here's the thing. If you give me this combination of things, I'm not gonna like it. Number one is it takes a long time for the romance to start, and number two is that when it does start, it's insta-love. I think insta-love can be done well. It's not a trope that I like absolutely hate, and I won't read a book if it has insta-love, but just the combination of like it taking so long for these characters to have a conversation, have multiple conversations, and then they're immediately obsessed with each other. The speculative direction that this book ended up being was not exactly what I thought it was, and I liked my thoughts better, unfortunately, than what this actually turned out to be. I'm not gonna spoil it, but the second half of this book was just like, there was still some beautiful writing, but there was also some cringier moments where I felt like the writing was very trying to be funny in a very like 2023 2024 specific way, like certain little ways that people talk and little jokes that are like specific to now, and I don't think that people will be talking like that in a few years. So yeah, there were some writing moments that I loved, and there were some writing moments where I was like, really? Like what? There was one sentence that said that the day felt climate changey. Like that's, I don't know, it's like, it's kind of jarring how beautiful some of the sentences are, and then how like in your face, contemporary and specific some of the little jokes are. I think other people might find that like funny. They might be like, wow, Tia Williams, you know, really keeps up with internet culture, but for me, not great. And then the thing that really makes me want to give this like a 2.5 star rating is that it was stressful and sad. Like I wasn't swooning. I wasn't excited to read about their romance. I was sad and I was stressed out. And you can argue that if I had read this book at a different time, I might feel a little differently about it. But I honestly just do think that it was the book. Just the combination of the insta-love and them not really even having that much time together. Like I think if you add up the amount of days and weeks that these characters actually spent with each other in this book before the epilogue is like not very long. And just the way that we had to be worried about certain things and like stressed about certain things along with the characters, I just really did not appreciate. It just wasn't what I want in a romance novel. I think if I had picked this up as like a historical fiction with magical realism and it had had more historical fiction vibes, it could have been a more decent novel for me, but yeah. Thankful that I got this from the library and didn't buy it. Sorry, Tia. This one just wasn't quite for me. There were things I enjoyed, but there were also things that I really did not. So 2.5 stars. My current plan is to move on to the spell shop, but if I end up going with a different book, I will let you know. I've kind of read a lot today, so I don't know that I'll be reading anymore, but I think I'm going to try this one out, and then if I'm not in the mood, I'll switch to something else and let you know. You know, I could probably wait to do this update until I look a lot better, but I'm not going to. I'm on page 144 of the spell shop. I want more of the flying cats. I need more of the flying cats. We have a sentient spider plant that is our main character's assistant, but there's a flying cat on the cover. I need more. So in this cozy fantasy, we have our main character, Keela, and Keela is a librarian in this capital city of the empire in this fantasy world. And the emperor in this world has kind of been hoarding magic. Like the wealthy and the nobles have been hoarding magic. And it used to be that sorcerers would go to these kind of islands and like the smaller, less centralized places in the empire, and the sorcerers would help out with the island. So it seems like a lot of the climate and a lot of the like well-being of the island and the food and the animals and the plants are dependent on magical upkeep. But because of whatever reason, greed or just apathy, the sorcerers have stopped coming, and the populace is very angry about this. And at the very, very, very beginning of this book, there is a revolution that takes place, but this book isn't about that. This book is about Keela fleeing from the city in a boat with her spider plant assistant and moving back to her home island. And where I am right now, she is just about to open the titular spell shop in her like cute little cottage home. And so basically what she's trying to do is sell jam, but it's really a front for her spell shop. And she can't really call them spells because it is illegal for magic to be used by people who aren't, you know, sorcerers, which she is not. And when she fled the library where she worked, she actually took some books because the library was burning and she didn't want them to be lost forever. Keela doesn't actually know if the revolution like fully worked and if there are new laws in place and if there is a more benevolent power in place or if things went back to normal. And so in the old order, her having these spell books is very illegal. So she's trying to help the people of this island whose land is suffering because of the lack of this magical upkeep, but she can't just be like, hey, I have spell books, I want to help you guys out. So she's kind of trying to disguise these spells as like remedies. And there is a little bit of a romance blooming with her like overly friendly neighbor guy who she apparently met as a child and doesn't really remember. And there are a number of like mythological creatures who just kind of inhabit this world kind of casually. So there are like what are they called, like fawns or satyrs, where it's like you're like a goat person. There are mer horses in the sea. There are mermaids. Keela herself has like blue skin and naturally blue hair. One of the side characters is a centaur woman. That is fun. I feel like we're not quite getting enough of the side characters for my taste right now. But yeah, I'm 144 pages in. My feelings right now are cute concept, but I'm a little bored. I think I struggle with this with cozy fantasy because it's just like you're kind of being sustained by the vibes. And I don't love, there's not like one aspect of anything that I truly like love and just like am so incredibly enamored with. Keela's character is a little bit flat for me. It kind of just seems like she is obsessed with books and she just is socially awkward and doesn't like to talk to anyone. But hopefully we're gonna get some more magic and some more of these fantastical creatures and some more romance. I think if all of these elements really start to come together really soon, I could give this a high rating. I've read most of this via audiobook, if I'm being honest. Yeah, it's not necessarily something that I'm wanting to like sit down and put all my focus onto. It's just a little bit too boring for that. It's time to wrap up the vlog, and I am going to give The Spell Shop 3 stars. I think that I am still trying to figure out if I even like cozy fantasy, because at certain times I felt like I was bored and at other times I wished that it were cozier. I guess I wish that this were a little more description heavy. Maybe the language and the imagery could have been a little more lush to really draw me into the world. So it's like I liked it, but it's like a mild like. You know, I don't have a lot of big complaints. It just didn't make me feel a lot of things. And I wasn't in love with it, and I wasn't excited to pick it up every time. But I do recommend this if you're looking for a cozy fantasy. I think this is a good one to check out. This is definitely not fantasy romance. There is no spice. This is not even that romance heavy, really. So if you're going into this for the romance, I think you will be a little bit disappointed. There is a romance, but it's a B plot. That is going to be the end of this vlog. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more bookish content from me, and I hope you have a lovely week.